Hi, I'm Matt Soper, and in this segment we're going to be interviewing Bill Rea as part of our World War II commemoration at 70 years.
Begin with, Omaha Beach stretched out quite a bit. There was a combined effort of the British and the American forces working together. And the area I hit in, our unit come in, is called Easy Red. We come in right over this sector here. Now in this sector here, what happened is that 1st Division, area sector where we hit, the 1st Division was there, and right back in here was a pillbox, and the man I was falling behind, of course, he'd already been, I came in on D-Day, D+1, and the beach, it had been secured somewhat. But this area I come in on, we waded in shoulder deep water, and as I came upon this man's body, there was a lot of guys down and killed. Why, it was a member of the 1st Infantry Division, and he had a flamethrower. And what he had done, he had knocked out this pillbox, but apparently somebody in that area of the thing got him and shot him right through the head.
Oh, wow.
And I could see where the bullet penetrated the helmet, and his back was broken open, and he had his picture of his mother and father and his wife with a young baby.
Wow.
And so I felt real bad right at the time when I ran by him. I thought, this family's going to be getting some pretty bad news. So, but this kind of gives you an idea how the beach trail, Omaha Beach was was the bloodiest beach of the campaign. And they push them in, and you can hook them up to sections and then ignite them, and it blew a hole in the barbed wire there so they could go in. But they had these steel gates so that would inhibit tanks to get in there. So, I mean, if people think they just jumped off a boat and walked ashore, they're wrong. Because you can see these people are in the water there. And then, of course, up above the bluff, they're combing you with machine gun fire, rifle fire, artillery fire. So it was a real rough landing. Drafted.
And where were you living?
At the time, I was working on a ranch up on Snake River, Colorado. I went to Fort Logan as my reception center, and then they sent me from there to Camp Barkley, Texas, which was a big medical training center in a little out of Abilene, Texas. It must have had about 45,000 troops there. And
wow.
The 45th Infantry was there as well, so we had about 90,000 troops on the area. Out of Camp Shanks, New York, and we went and we landed over there in Scotland, and then we were sent to a what they call a replacement center down around London, England. And we waited there for several months until we got assigned, and I got assigned to an amphibian unit that was in Swansea, Wales. And they, at that time, that's when this new duck, as they call it, amphibian truck, was being explored, and they were unloading ships. And then prior to the invasion, we went on maneuvers with the 28th Infantry and had landings and everything, and to get us kind of accustomed to, being a. And then later we was alerted for the invasion, and then we were broken up into units. Why I didn't get in on a D-Day campaign, I'll never know, because our headquarters unit, they went on D-Day, and we was always with them. But for some reason they broke us up, and we went up to another section called Land's End, and we loaded into LSTs. The others loaded into these great big transports, and these LSTs, well, I don't have that picture. We had 125 LSTs loaded to the bulk. I mean, you couldn't imagine, you couldn't put a sardine in there. They're that heavy. And with trucks and everything out on the decks, tanks, And so then when we pulled into the landing, we were the first LST to unload, and we unloaded. When we hit the beach, it was about probably around 9 o'clock in the morning. We waded in shoulder deep water.
Wow.
And after just about 5 minutes after they dropped us offshore, about 70, 100 yards offshore. That's why the water was so deep. We jumped out on the craft, sunk right into my shoulders. I inflated and did in. We no more got up there at the beach, and a Tiger tank pulled in through 2 rounds of high explosive ammunition, right exactly where we were. And when it explodes above the ground, and it just hit into these steel decks of these sunken ships. And just like you take a whole handful of gravel and throw up on a tin roof, that's how you felt hitting that. So it would have wiped out that whole unit that landed there. Not a one of us would have done otherwise. Wow. It would cut us to shreds.
Wow.
So we were quite fortunate. But one of the big problems on the beach was it was heavily mined with landmines. And what they are, they bury them about, maybe 18 inches below the ground, and then they have these wires, hard to see, and they call them trip wires. Well, when you hit one of those, it explodes underneath the ground and blows the mine up about above your knee, and then it blows up enough to take your legs off.
Wow.
And they purposely do that because when you have a casualty of that nature, it requires many more personnel to take care of them, if you can. I mean, because you're going to have instant bleeding and terrible wounds.
Oh, sure.
We lost several men on those landmines. I went through one of the fields not knowing it, but I was fortunate to get out of it without getting blown up.
Now, you were a medic over there.
I was a medic, yeah. Yeah, we were assigned to these amphibian truck companies. We had 458th, 459th, and 453rd, and they in turn were assigned to the regimental combat. And of course, they had 50 caliber machine guns mounted up on the truck, so as they went in the inland, they could start firing. But a lot of them, I don't know what the casualty rate was. Quite high.
Oh, yeah.
In our companies. So the fighting was a very fierce fighting for the first few hours. In fact, General Omar Bradley, who was in charge of the landing, he was a lieutenant general, he was almost ready to call it off because I mean, you can't imagine the number of people dead. I mean, I looked along the beach and they would just pile on top of each other. I mean, you'd see a puddle of blood as big as this room.
Wow.
Now, it could have been some seawater mixed with the blood, but the blood from those wounds are flowing into that. And I looked down there and that, and pieces of people's bodies, an arm, a leg. So, I mean, it was a very fiercely fought battle. And all I got to say, like one of the commanders of the infantry company of the 1st Division, they were brave men.
Oh, man, no kidding.
I mean, they and like I said, all this barbed wire they had to get under, all this stuff. Like you can see, they're pinned down out there in the water, and as the tide comes in, you got that water to deal with, and that was cold water. But there was a lot of bodies floating around out there when I was water in the way, and as the tide comes in, you got that water to deal with, and that was cold water. But there was a lot of bodies floating around out there when I went in, and they had it all, the barbed wire and that. It was hard to get ashore.
So when you started to come in across the English Channel in the amphibious or the LST, how far from shore was it when you actually jumped out of the boat and into the water?
Well, let's see. I suppose our LST was probably a mile or so offshore, but that Higgins boat or that landing craft, it didn't take it long to get to shore because it wound up those old motors and in there we went.
Now you'll
Well, they were just steel permits for tanks, to keep tanks from getting in there, and then they had tiller mines hooked to them. So if you moved them or anything, that was another inhibitor to the people trying to get in. And then you had that barbed wire, so it was all an entanglement for both mechanized and infantrymen to get through. And while getting through there, well, you see they had quite an advantage up there on the cliff. They could see you and they could just mow you down.
Oh, yeah.
Just cover those areas with machine gun fire. So it was, like I said, I mean, the guys, and then being out there in that cold water, you want to get out of there because you're cold and very uncomfortable. So it was a courageous landing by those that made it through, and here it kind of gives you an idea of it was kind of steep ground, and then here they are up there firing down at you.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, the advantage is all to their benefit. Then down on the lower end of the beach on Fox Green, that area, that's where the cliffs were, and that's where the 5th and 6th Ranger Battalions, they went in and scaled those 200 or 300 foot cliffs with ropes. I was a aid man on a 40 millimeter gun crew that when the airborne went over, because each of those LSTs had 19 anti-aircraft guns, and there was 125 LSTs. So if they didn't let them know that they were friendly troops, they would open up with all that anti-aircraft.
Wow.
And those planes would have been, those troopers would have been shot in their plane. But they dropped red flares, and the gunner said that's the airborne going over. So they went over us quite late because I mean, it had to be quite a ways toward the morning hours because they couldn't stay up in the air very long, and it was dark. They had to have some kind of visibility. But what the Germans had done, they had flooded some of those fields so that when they hit that water, it was deep enough that a lot of them drowned in that area.
Oh, wow.
So it was a tough landing for the airborne too because of that thing. Amphibian units, but things got so scattered there because of I mean, you can plan something, but when you meet all that opposition, whole situation, the whole schedule changes. So there was a Navy 5th Beach Battalion, and they did most of the aid work for all casualties because they had all the doctors and everybody seemed to center in that unit. Normally, we would have taken care of our own, set up an aid station and taken care of our own personnel of these 3 duck companies, but they had much more equipment and personnel to handle it. So we didn't do much but just be available if they needed us. But there was doctors, a number of doctors. And the one thing that was bad, the 5th Beach Battalion of the Navy, they landed there too. And they had some real nice doctors. We had worked together prior to the invasion because they came to our aid station where we was in Swansea, Wales. And we got acquainted and really liked Phil. But most of them got killed. I mean, those LSTs were hit hard, either enemy fire from back, either from mortar or artillery fire or from cannon fire on the beach. So they really got hit hard. I don't know what the casualty rate was at, but I know it was tremendously high. So our aid work was rather limited in what we could do because all we had was what was in our pouches on our side of on our sides, whereas down there in the 5th Beach Battalion, they had much more equipment and had a number of doctors right there.
Now, do you remember where you slept that first night?
Yeah, I do. Very much so. I remember digging a foxhole, and that night it rained on us. And I remember pulling my raincoat around me and pulling my steel helmet over my head. But when the night came, we had bombers coming in, enemy bombers, and that was really frightening because these gunners, now you can imagine this, 19 guns, anti-aircraft guns, 125 LSTs, and they're shooting right toward the beach at these planes, and these tracer bullets are going right over you. And
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
I was hoping, I thought, boy, if that guy out there dropped that gun a little bit, he's going to put that shell right in my foxhole. So I mean, those tracer bullets were going over us, and of course, in a higher anti-aircraft fire going up in the higher altitudes, and when it breaks, that shrapnel got to come somewhere. It doesn't go up; it comes down. And there was people getting killed. A guy, I think about around 10 or 8 feet from my hole, got his throat cut. He died in his foxhole from the shrapnel.
Wow.
So I mean, there's so many different things happening in a war that are fatal, or can be fatal. So I mean, I was really concerned about the anti-aircraft fire at night. He was in the back of it, and he hit a mine, and boom. But the thing that saved everybody, no casualties, because we sandbagged our trucks around the dashboard, in the front of the truck, as well as the bed. So when that mine went off, it blew all that shrapnel and everything. It hit those sandbags as far as it went. But boy, you should have seen those soldiers shooting out the back end of that truck and running down the beach as fast as they could run. And a fellow driving a big Caterpillar, he hit a big mine. It blew the old track out. Boy, he was off of that cat running down the road as fast as he could run. It was hilarious to us,
Yeah.
but it was a pretty serious thing to him.
Oh, definitely.
It could have been, but again, they sandbagged all the equipment. So when it did happen, that saved him from death.
Hmm.
But boy, I can just remember those guys shooting out of that truck just like bullets. When their feet hit the ground, they just go like that. It was humorous, and yet it was so serious.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had these planes returning home that had been hit. We had a medium-sized bomber that dropped its motors just 100 feet from our command post. Mm-hmm. The motor dropped out of it, and boy, you hear around. And we was watching up there, and pretty soon these guys started jumping out of that. The wing tore off and started floating down, and all 5 of the guys in that plane landed in the English Channel. I guess they got them out from some aircraft. I mean, some boat went out and got them.
Wow.
But a lot of things are happening like that.
Mm.
And then the next day was sitting there we went down and had this one pillbox. We set up as an aid station for our unit, getting things together. There were just 3 of us aid men. We didn't have a captain, any medical surgeon, and so we went down to try to set up a aid station. But we had 3 Germans that had been hit by a flamethrower, and all there was left of them were skeletons. And we had to throw their skeletons in a truck and get them out of there and clean up the place. And then when it was eating there, boy, here come a German plane down through the beach strafing us. And right behind him came a Spitfire. And so, boy, he started strafing the German, and they went zigzagging down the end clear to the other end, and I guess the Spitfire shot him down.
Huh. Wow.
About, I'd say 2 or 3 weeks right on the beach.
Oh.
And then we moved in, then they called it Advanced Communication Zone. And then we stayed in a apple orchard, and we dug foxholes there, and then later on we found materials that wooden scraps of wood, and we built little shelters and put our tent halves over it as a roof,